Yes, I have a middle name. My middle name is Leona.
Oh.
The name, one name seemed to come from a story that my mother had read, and the other name came from the Bible.
Oh.
So I have a mixture of a name.
Uh-huh. Well, Dad was telling me last night that he thought Aunt Lelia was supposed to be Leila, or pronounced a little different when they first named her, but everybody called her Lelia.
Well, that always has, it always has gone. You know, the spelling is Lelia, the way we do it, but people call her different. Leila and Lila and Leela. So, but she always has been Leela to us, or Leela, Leel, sometimes they call her, nickname.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know how they get it, and I don't know where the name came from. The name Minerva, the middle name, is a family name. There were older women named Minerva.
Well, that was my next question. I didn't know her middle name either.
Well, that's where her middle name came from.
Uh-huh. Well, I have down everyone's birthday. Dad wasn't quite sure the year his mother was born, but he said it was the same year that you bought your sewing machine. I was thinking maybe it might have been, oh, I have it down, 1889 she was born. Okay.
Well, I would need to look that up, but then I think that's about right.
Okay, well,
now that's Mabel.
right. I was going through the records on George Blackburn, your grandfather, and it said he came from Ireland on his papers when he joined the service.
Yes.
Is there any certain town in Ireland that you ever heard of, or?
Well, I have to get a little material for that, I think.
Well, we don't have to get it right now, that's all right. I just, we can look that up later, but,
yes, they were Irish, both he and his wife.
Uh-huh. Okay, well, we have down, he married Frances Walsh.
Yeah.
And some of the papers called her Fanny and some Frances, and I was surprised they were baptized at the Catholic church. Were the Blackburns Catholic?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Were you raised Catholic?
Was I?
Uh-huh.
No. My father wasn't either. He wasn't very much in favor of some of the Catholic beliefs, so he pulled out of the church.
Uh-huh.
And so neither he nor his brother William were Catholic.
Uh-huh.
But then later William joined the Catholic Church, and they are Catholic to this day.
Uh-huh.
That woman where we went
in Omaha?
In Omaha.
She's Catholic?
Yeah.
Well, you can sit down. We can look that up later. And you had told me that that he had the sons William, Edward, and Thomas, and your father was Edward.
No, yes, my
right.
father was Edward, and the brother who was 2 years younger was William.
William.
And then there was a younger brother who was killed when he was about 15.
Oh, and that was Thomas.
Yeah.
What was he killed from?
Well, their mother put them out to work.
Uh-huh.
And every boy was with a different farmer.
Right.
And this boy was riding a horse. He was going home for the weekend, spend it with his mother, and somehow or the story in, he had a couple of chickens that he was carrying home, and the horse got frightened, and the horse threw him and dragged him, and he was hurt and killed that way.
Uh-huh.
And he is buried in the cemetery down here near Laurel.
Okay.
The Spring Valley Cemetery.
Okay.
They don't know where the grave is. There's no stone. And of course he was young, too young to be married.
I see. Well, you said that the brothers were farmed out to different farms. I know it was kind of hard times back then. She applied for the
Army money.
Army money. Some of the papers had, it looked like the name Mary. Did they have a girl? Or do you think somebody just miswrote?
Well, afterward, she was married again. Their mother was married again. That's quite a story in itself. They were building a railroad down here south of Laurel, going through Haverhill and south of Laurel. And of course a crew came in to build. And there was a good-looking Irishman with the crew, and he was courting Mary, and they got married. Well, then the boss of the railroad came to inspect, and it turned out that this man was a bigamist. He had been married before. He had a wife elsewhere, back east somewhere. But they had a child, and that girl was called Frances. So Frances is really the half-sister. Frances is the half-sister of William and Mary, or William and Ed. So there really are three parts to this family. There's the Blackburn family, which lives, Ed Blackburn, which lives in Iowa, and William Blackburn, which went to Nebraska, and then the half-sister who went out to Nebraska and was there with her brother for a while and was married there. And that we call the O'Mara family.
Okay.
And so there really are three parts to the family.
So was this Mary that was a half-sister?
Frances.
Frances. And she was the daughter of Mary? Or?
Well, yes.
Okay.
She was the half-sister of the boys.
Oh, okay. So she was Frances's child.
Yes, Frances' child.
Okay.
But
And her name was Mary. Okay.
No, her name was Frances, the girl. The girl was Frances.
Okay.
I don't know where you're getting the Mary.
Well, it was on some of those papers, so I was confused.
Well, somebody thought that there was another child, another little girl, but I don't know that has ever been proven, that there was another little girl.
Yeah, on that one paper, it kind of looked like the name Mary, and we tried to make it into the name Thomas, but it just wasn't Thomas, and we were kind of wondering if there was a Mary.
No.
But you had told me that the boys, farmed out, and then they got the idea maybe they'd go to work for themselves.
Yeah.
And so which one went first, Edward or William?
Well, Edward really had the idea that they would go and work. They were old enough that he thought they could work for themselves because they weren't getting any money. You see, these farmers just gave them clothes and food.
Right.
They didn't make anything. So Edward had the idea that he and William would go and farm for themselves. And their mother did have 80 acres of ground down there in the Laurel neighborhood, 80 acres of ground. And that's really where the Blackburn farm started, with that 80 acres. And my father took it over and was running it for Grandma, his mother. And eventually he bought it from her and then added other land to it. So that's how I wanted the farm to be 100 years old, and I said to my sister Lelia, why don't we make it 100 years old? And she said, well, it hasn't been in the family that long enough. But when we took Grandma's 80, then it was. Took Grandma's 80, and then Father's land that he was buying, it was 100 years old.
Oh, great.
So we've a paper that shows that the Blackburn land was 100 years old.
Oh, that's wonderful. Was that just a few years ago, or?
Oh, Lelia was living.
Oh,
so it's
well over 100.
Well, it's about 20 anyway. About 20. Harlan and Mabel took me down to Des Moines to get the paper. It was at the state fair. They handed the papers out at the state fair.
Uh-huh.
So they took me down there, and I had the paper. I had the paper that shows that the land is 100 years old. In the family, 100 years.
Uh-huh. Well, did William go to the farm then and work with Edward, or how
No,
did he get to Nebraska?
William went to Nebraska. And
Okay.
he wanted Edward to come out there and work with him, but Edward didn't like the looks of the land as well. And so William then married and out there, a school teacher, and settled down out there. So
Okay.
then that separated the two fellows. But William would always come back. They weren't. It wasn't such good farmland. They could raise corn, but that was not so good. So they would raise hay and run the cattle. And every year, William would go into Chicago with cattle. That they would make up. All the farmers would make up a train load of cattle, and they would ship them into Des Moines. And then William would stop off at Marshalltown and call his brother Edward that he was here. Could they get together? And so they'd get together for a visit when they were shipping the cattle.
Uh-huh.
So for years after they kept up the friendship.
Well, let me see. Dad told me some funny stories that he worked with, William worked with Buffalo Bill a couple years.
I don't know.
Have you heard that one?
I don't know anything about that one.
And they said he used to eat baked beans off a big sheath knife, and one year he came and he took his table knife and showed people how he could eat peas off of the knife. And all the children were impressed.
Well, he could still do that when I was a child.
Uh-huh.
Because one time we were at his daughter's in Nebraska, and he could handle the peas on the knife. He was showing that. Now Harlan had seen him do that.
Uh-huh.
Harlan saw him eat peas.
Well, that's probably where Dad heard it from.
That's what, yeah, from him.
They said when William's mother died, he took a clean shirt and his toothbrush and came to Iowa for the funeral and didn't tell his family where he was going. He just came and they were all wondering where he was, which seemed kind of odd.
He came when he came for our mother's funeral. He didn't. He just had the clothes he had on.
Oh, uh-huh.
And when he came here, Harlan went and got him off the train or the bus. And when he came, he was almost late for the funeral. And he just had the clothes he had on, because I remember that afterward Lelia washed his shirt.
Oh.
Washed his clothes for him while he was here. And
well, that might have been the one then.
I think
But William, he was Francis Gamble's father, right?
No.
Okay. And did she have brothers and sisters?
Yes, there were 3 girls and 1 boy.
Oh, okay.
And the boy was William, and he was killed in a farm accident when he was a young man. He was farming. He was married, but they had no children.
Okay.
And I was asking even when I was back there the last couple of years about the woman he married, but they didn't keep track of each other. When Willie died, she sort of let go of the family. She didn't keep track of them. But they knew where she was and who she was, and they had no children. So
so you and your sisters were born at the farm that Edward had taken up from his mother, right? Where
yeah.
Over by Laurel.
Yeah.
And can you remember what your house was like?
Well, we have a picture of it with a small frame house,
Uh-huh.
to the little front porch. And the upstairs, there was an upstairs on the back of it, but you went up outside. You didn't go through the house. The upstairs, that's usually where the hard men slept. They would put the two hard men up there.
Uh-huh. Well, I took Harlan to Des Moines last night. We were talking about outhouses. Everybody must have had an outhouse then. And some of the ladies in my club tell how they use the catalogs for toilet paper, and he said no, they use corn cobs. And I said, oh, don't tell me that. That's more than I want to know.
Well, I think that was men out in the barn, you know.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the men, I think the men just went in the barn, and they would use a corn cob or a handful of hay, and as to wipe. They didn't have paper. They didn't use it then. But yes, I'm sure the catalogs are used in the house.
I suppose the invention of toilet paper was really something.
Oh yeah. I don't think people knew what it was.
Yeah.
Maybe people in cities did, but of course the catalog paper was not that bad. It was not heavy, of course. It was.
You said that after 3 girls, your father decided to move to town.
Well, when I was born, I was the 3rd girl, you know. And he said, well, we didn't get a boy. We didn't get a hard man, so I guess we better move to town.
Oh.
That was a joke.
Well, when you were little, did you have certain playmates, or just your sisters, or were you just kind of isolated?
They were all, my older sister was 20 years older than I was. The next one was 14. So I was a baby, and I really almost had 2 mothers, because my mother was very lenient. That is, for instance, she would let me do things, and the older girls didn't think that was right. They would say, we didn't get to do that, or we didn't have that.
That's how it always is in every family, I think. Dan got to do a lot more than Harlan did, and everybody.
That's it too.
I think
so you see, I was so far behind. The next girl was 14. Mabel was 14. Lelia was 20 when I was born. So we were.
Was she at home, or was she out in
school? Both the girls were home until they got a chance to teach, and then they got a chance to teach and taught in rural schools. Both Mabel and Lelia taught in rural schools. Now, they didn't go to college. They wrote for their certificate. They would go to the college superintendent's office, and he would give tests. And if they passed the test, then they got their certificate. And so, like, lawyers used to do that too, you know. In the old days, lawyers didn't go to college. They wrote for their tests and for their degrees.
Okay.
So I was the first one that went to high school, and I was the first one that went to college.
I see. So when you say high school, I mean, would that be, did they have 12 grades back then, or just 8, or?
Yeah, in some towns, but our little town of Laurel was too small. We just had through 8th grade.
And then you went to college after that, if you...
No, you went to high school. You had to go to Marshalltown,
I see.
Or you went to Grinnell, or Newton. You went to some larger town that had a high school.
So did the other 2 sisters go through high school?
No.
Or no, they just went to the 8th grade?
They went to 8th grade.
And did you go to Marshalltown? High school,
after my father died, my mother said, well, it looks like we're through here. Where shall we move? Shall we move to Marshalltown? Shall we move to Grinnell? Shall we move to Laurel? And they decided Marshalltown, and came and looked for a house here. And that's the only time I ever remember moving, you know.
Right. Did you have any pets when you were a little girl?
Well, I had a big white rabbit that
Oh.
I had that my father built a box for.
A hutch, yeah.
And we had a big dog that we brought from the farm. My father didn't want to bring him. He wanted to leave him to the farm, but he kept coming to town, following us, you know. So about the third time he came to town, my dad said, well, if he likes us that well, we'll keep him. So then we kept him.
Oh, that's
That
great.
was old Shep, and he was a big shepherd dog. And we had him until he died in Laurel.
Well, when you moved to Laurel, what was the farm? Was it rented out, or did somebody work it?
Yes, it was rented. It was rented, but my father used to go out quite often and do work out there, you know. He'd repair buildings, and he'd keep track of the man who was renting it to see that he was doing a good job.
Now, was it a grain farm?
Was it a what?
Grain farm?
Yes. But of course, my father had enough cattle, and they raised some hogs. And I don't think they ever had sheep, but they raised cattle and they raised hogs. And my mother had all kinds of fowl. She had turkeys and geese and ducks and lots of chickens. She used to dress fowl and sell them to the market in Laurel. And also she would take eggs and made butter and sold that to the market in Laurel. And they walked across the field, cat-a-cornered across the field from the farm to Laurel.
Did you have to do chores? Like gather the eggs?
I was too little, but my mother, well, Lelia could milk. My mother could milk. Of course, when the men were gone thrashing, you know, William and Ed started a thrashing crew. They got an engine, and they traveled around the country thrashing. And sometimes they would be gone all week or all weekend. And of course, when they were gone, my mother had to do the milking.
Did they have a lot of milk cows?
Oh, just an average farm. No, they didn't raise a lot.
But average back then by hand is kind of different than now on machine. That's why I wondered. Let's see. Do you think your parents were very strict?
Oh, I think they were. We knew what we could do and what we shouldn't do. And we were never scolded. I can't remember that I was ever punished, really, not whipped or spanked or anything like that. My sisters were more cranky with me than my mother, because they kept saying, you know, we didn't get to do this and we didn't get to do that, or she's too little to do it. And but my mother was always very, very lenient with us. Good. And of course we didn't. We had a country church, and the girls went to, but I was pretty small then. We moved from the farm when I was only about 2 or 2.5.
Oh, so you were very little.
So then I went to church in town. I went to children's church in town. But the older girls went to church in the country when they were older.
Was it like a congregational type church, or just no certain denomination, or?
Well, I'm sure it was a denomination, but I don't
just
remember what
whatever
it was.
Laurel had.
Yeah.
Do you remember any certain ways of celebrating holidays, or any special tradition?
We didn't have, you mean like 4th of July?
Yeah, or Christmas,
well,
or
the only thing
Thanksgiving?
The only thing we did was sometimes we went to town for 4th of July. 4th of July would have fireworks, and there would be a man come and speak. And when my father was a young man, he played ball with the country fellows. The country fellows had a team, and they always played ball. So my father did that. But Christmas Christmas was connected with the church.
Uh-huh.
What Christmas we had was with the church. We had a tree. We would sing Christmas songs, you know, and that was connected with the church.
Did everybody used to come home for Thanksgiving and Christmas for those occasions?
Oh, yes,
yeah.
Mostly.
Okay.
Of course, our two older girls were teaching, you know,
Uh-huh.
and they usually taught close enough that my father could go and drive home with him. He would go and get them, take them on Sunday night, and go and get them on Friday night. They were often home. And I don't know, nobody ever got so very far away from home.
Uh-huh. Well, Leonard thought that Mabel might have taught a few years before she got married. You know how many years she might have taught, or?
Well, not too many. She was teaching in the little town of Van Cleve when she met Blackburn Warden, and she was only there about 1 year when they were married. And before that, she had taught a couple of years in country school, I think south of Laurel, but what school I don't know.
Uh-huh.
Now Lelia taught all around Laurel, all the country schools around Laurel, and after we came to Marshalltown, she taught in country schools here.
Oh.
And around Marshalltown, so she taught more, a good deal more than Mabel did.
When you were going to elementary school there in Laurel, did you live very far from the school?
No, just about a block.
Or you could walk. And did you took your lunch and?
Well, we often took our lunch because my mother. I went to school to Lelia, you know, and it was easier for my mother to fix 2 lunches.
Oh, than to go home and eat.
Yes, than to go home and eat. And my sister and I would sit down in the schoolhouse and eat our lunch together.
Do you remember any favorite teachers? Or favorite subjects when you were young?
Oh, I always liked school. I can't remember that any one standing out. I liked to read. I liked to read better. Then I liked math. I was not as good as math. But I liked history. I liked English.
And what did they have for recess? Did they have a playground or?
Oh yes, there was a playground around the schoolhouse, and we had a noon hour. And we used to play games.
Like, did you jump rope back then, or play hopscotch, or?
I don't remember that we jumped rope. But we played a game called Dare Base, and sometimes it was usually a running game. There would be a prison, and you would be touched, and then you were in the prison. And you had something of that kind.
Kind of like they have tag today.
Yes, yes. And the boys and the girls all played together. We didn't have any difference.
Do they have any music, or you studied music back then, or?
Well, yes, we had in the room where, well, there were 2 rooms in the Laurel School, downstairs and upstairs, and it was to the 4th grade and then to the 8th grade, and there was an organ in each room. And we had usually, now my sister couldn't play, but we often had a boy or a girl who could play, and so we would sing with the organ, play and sing with the organ. And we had a music book, but we weren't taught much music.
Did they have any dancing in school back then, or?
Well, I wasn't big enough for that. I don't know whether the 8th graders did or not. We had parties. We would have a party at Halloween and a party at Christmas. And, you know, we would have candy, taffy apples, and you know, things of that kind.
Uh-huh.
Party.
Did they have Halloween back then?
Oh, yes.
I don't mean to be dumb, I'm just asking.
Yeah, we had Halloween, but we were not, we didn't celebrate it like they do now.
Yeah.
We didn't have tricks or treats.
Uh-huh.
I used to go down to an older couple on our part of town, and they would sometimes give me a cookie or two. That was Halloween.
Uh-huh.
That's all the trick or treat that I can remember that we had.
Did you, when you were going to elementary, did you always think you wanted to be a teacher, or when did you have?
I always thought I wanted to be a teacher because the girls were teachers.
Uh-huh.
And at home I would play teacher.
Oh.
I would always play teacher. And my mother was older,
Uh-huh.
and she would play along with me that way. And we also played store. We had a little girlfriend and I would cut pictures out of magazines, men and women, boys and girls. That was our sales stuff. And
Uh-huh.
then we'd play store and sell those things. I remember we had a south porch that was always nice and warm, and the sun was there, and we would go out on that porch and play. That was where our store was. So we did that, but I always thought there didn't seem to be much else that women did in those days except work in a store,
Uh-huh.
or be a clerk, you know, work in a lawyer's office, or teach. Those were about, or nurse. Those were about the only things that women had to do.
Well, when I was little, they had paper dolls, and did you have dolls or any certain kind of toy that you?
Well, we had more of our own, as I say, that we cut out of catalogs.
Uh-huh.
And I had one small China doll.
Uh-huh.
And when I was about 6 years old, I think, my sister Mabel brought me a very pretty doll, which I still have, with flaxen hair, and that was for my Christmas. She bought that for me. And but I never played with it because it was too pretty and I didn't want to get it dirty.
Oh, I'll have to see that sometime. And then I did say about the young teachers, they wanted them to be single when they were teaching in the country schools. That was kind of the rule then.
Yes.
And I wanted to make sure and get that on the tape. And then when we were talking about any special toys, and you said you played store out on the porch, and you played like homemade games like that, and then you said Mabel gave you this doll when you're about 6?
Yeah, 6.
And she put it out when you came home, or?
We had gone to Christmas program at the church, and of course I had a piece, spoke a little piece and sang a little song. So when we came home, my sister Mabel said, we ought to look in the front room and see what Santa left. So we opened the front door, and the doll was sitting in the little rocking chair in the front room.
Oh.
Everybody else knew about the doll except me.
Oh.
And so there was the dolly. And so Mabel gave it to me.
Uh-huh.
I think she had never had one herself, so she wanted somebody to have a pretty one.
Uh-huh.
But everybody else had helped with it because my mother had made the clothes.
Uh-huh.
Part of the clothes were my baby things.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Well,
and she was so pretty, I really never did play with her. I had a little China doll that I played with more.
And you said you called her Violet.
I called her Violet.
Uh-huh. Oh, she's so beautiful. Let's see. No, I'm quite a sewer, Aunt Eunice. Did they have sewing machines? When did they come in?
Well, the one that we have upstairs is the one that my mother had in the farm.
Uh-huh.
And it is over 100 years old. And I was never, well, I'll tell you, my mother didn't want me to sew because I was going to spoil the cloth.
Oh.
So the older girls and my mother did the sewing, and I never learned to sew. And about the same way with cooking, because she thought I would waste too much stuff. So I I didn't get to cook until I was away teaching school for myself and had a little apartment. And then I had to learn how to cook because I didn't learn at home.
Uh-huh.
Now, the other girls were all taught. They could all make pie and cake and do this, that, and the other thing. And when Crisco came in, my mother said to the older girls, well, you could use that stuff if you want to, but I'm going to keep on using lard.
Uh-huh.
And she could make the best pie crust of any of them with lard, because she was used to it. And so that was, but so I wasn't much of a cook until I was grown up. And I'm not much of a cook now.
Did she preserve a lot of things on her own, or have a big garden, or?
Oh yes, always a big garden.
Can a lot of things?
Yes, oh yes, dry.
Uh-huh.
Dry fruit and dried apples, you know. Have put stuff out on even on the roof at the farm, you know.
Oh, when you, I know you were so small when you left the farm, but so they probably didn't have their own butchering, did they, after you went to Laurel, or
Well,
did you buy meat at the locker?
No, they would, well, my father would usually go in with somebody, maybe it was the man on the farm, and they butchered together.
Oh.
And there were what I would call lockers, but not as sophisticated as they are now.
Uh-huh.
Not like the kind that Wesley and Anita run, you know.
Uh-huh.
But they would always have meat, and they even smoked meat.
Oh, had a smokehouse.
Yeah.
Did they have to make their own lard?
Oh yes.
I can just barely remember when I was real little that they made lard, and those little cracklings, they used to taste good.
Yeah. Yes, my mother always said bought lard. She cooked with lard.
Uh-huh.
And all the time too.
Did they eat as much meat as we eat now? We had meat
Well,
and
I think
potato.
probably more, because in the country, when they were farming and they had the hard men, they would even have meat for breakfast, you know, like bacon for breakfast, or even pork chops or ham or something. I think they ate more meat on the farm than we did. After we went to town, of course, then we had so much meat. My father, of course, he was not a great meat eater, but he thought he had to have a piece of meat or he didn't have a meal.
Oh, piece of meat, yeah. You they probably had to make all the bread and all the desserts and everything from scratch, and the farm wife probably had to bake a lot.
I can't remember when we ever had a loaf of, my mother was great on donuts. She could make the best donuts in the world.
Oh.
On the farm, she used to make donuts practically every week because the hired men were so crazy about them. And always pie crust, you know. And I can't remember when we ever had a bomb pie.
Right. Did you have fruit trees at all, or was fruit available to you?
Oh yes, at Laurel we had a great arbor. We had along from the house to the barn, all great vines. And my mother used to make lots of jam and jelly and juice. And then we had a couple of apple trees out in the backyard, and canned those, and dried apples. So we always had apples.
Well, I'm not very well versed in Laurel. Is the place still there, Aunt Eunice? I imagine the place where you lived in town, or?
Yes, it's right on, of course, there's the main street of Laurel goes north and south.
Right.
And right by our house is the street that goes east and west. And they have all named, fancy names now, like, you know, your folks didn't used to
Right,
have
like
name
a
to
street name.
And across the street, ours was a little gray house, and across the street from us was a church. And back of us was a big, big barn. And then on the end of that block was another church. And that church down there, back of the barn, was where I went to Sunday school. And so we were right in the middle. And then the schoolhouse was, as I say, just about a block away.
Now, are any of those buildings still standing there?
Yes, the house.
House is there?
The house we lived in. The barn is gone. The church has been remodeled, but it's still there. Both churches are still there.
Well, what color is the house now? Is it still gray?
It's gray, still gray, gray and white.
We'll have to look and see if I can see it.
Yeah.
Okay, how old were you when your father passed away?
Well, I was just going on, I was 13, about 13.
And you were still at Laurel then?
Yeah. Yes, and we stayed there another year. So I doubled on, I was in 8th grade 2 years. Because we didn't move.
So you just got extra training that way?
Yeah. And I had my sister Lelia as a teacher that second year.
You have to call her Miss Blackburn?
I said to my mother, I'm not going to call her Miss Blackburn. My mother said, well, you don't need to.
Yeah.
But
I don't suppose you got to call her, hey, sister.
She saw I didn't get any extra. Well, anyway, we would have the physiology lesson, and when we got through with the physiology lesson, and the other kids had answered questions, then she'd say, Eunice, you may review the lesson. So then I got caught on that. I had to review the whole lesson.
I see.
So she made me pay up for it.
Yeah.
Of course, I was a smart little girl. I always got good grades, so it didn't bother.
One thing you said that when the teachers were teaching in these country schools, they weren't supposed to be married. And I thought that was really surprised me. And didn't you say when you were teaching, one of the ladies had been married and they all kept a secret?
Yes.
Yeah. Was that just the tradition then, that they were supposed to be single teachers?
Yes. That was just understood. That no married women were hired. And if they got married, they were discharged, dismissed. But of course, if they could get by with it, like the one did, got married about 3 months before school was out, she got by with it.
Right. Well, when Lelia and Mabel were off teaching, they had a place close to where they taught to stay.
Yes, usually.
When you had Lelia for a teacher in Laurel, did she stay at home then?
Yes, she was at home.
Okay, and did you go to any big town very often or make any special trip?
Oh dear, no.
Probably had
It was a big experience for us to go to Marshalltown. Marshalltown was a big trip. We used to go to the fair in Marshalltown. It was a county fair.
I suppose they had.
I don't remember. I don't even remember being to Des Moines.
Well, I suppose everything was horse and buggy then, wasn't it?
Yes.
I'm not sure. When would you have seen your first car? Was that a big experience?
Yes. My father was always very mechanical. And of course, cars were one of his loves. He wanted a car. So he finally got one. And of course, we still had horses then, but he had one of the first cars in Laurel. And so.
Was that like a Model A or something like that?
No,
or?
it was not a Ford.
It
was, I'm not sure whether it was a Nash. I'm not sure which his was. But
Well, did you have any other jobs before you started teaching, or
No,
didn't work in a store or anything?
no.
Okay.
There really weren't that many extra jobs for girls.
Uh-huh.
I just helped around home and
Well, we knew that Aunt Lelia did the tatting. Did you have any special talent or hobby or craft that you like to do?
well, I learned to tat because all the big girls were tatting.
Uh-huh.
And the grandma and grandpa Bolfer next door to us, he would always take an interest in me. And one day he went by and I was tatting with a shuttle made with a piece of cardboard. And so he looked at it. It was a make thing, you know.
Uh-huh, homemade.
So that night when he came home from Laurel Town, he brought me a little blue shuttle, and I still have that little tatting shuttle, and I learned to tat. I made quite a few things with tatting. Handkerchief, ruching.
Uh-huh.
I made Lelia corset cover with tatting. But I never did learn to crochet.
Uh-huh.
And I never did learn to knit. And
Well, Elizabeth just took a little class on a special Saturday school, and she can do the knit stitch now.
oh, good.
So she was real tickled with herself.
Oh, good.
But they made a little story about you go in the house when you go in the stitch, and then you go around the back, and that's winding the yarn, and then off pops Jack, so that you pop the stitch off. So you
Oh.
said this little rhyme, and I've never heard it when I learned to knit, so I thought it was quite neat.
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh. And let's see. I suppose like most times, did you have a lot of neighborhood gatherings where different neighbors would get together, or not too much?
Well, it was more with the church.
Uh-huh.
And, or otherwise it was just people. Well, they did go to school. I mean, some of the grown-ups came to visit school.
Uh-huh.
But I don't remember that we had clubs or my mother didn't belong to any anyway.
Uh-huh. How old were you when you first had a car?
Oh,
Can
heavens, I had taught school for years. I didn't have a car because I didn't have money to buy one.
Uh-huh.
So I was an oldster when I got a car.
Did your parents teach you to drive? Or they probably didn't have driver's ed.
Well, no, they didn't have driver's ed. After my father passed away, there was an older gentleman in the neighborhood who taught my sister to drive. And of course, when Mabel got married, her husband taught her to drive.
Uh-huh.
And
After we turned the tape off, Aunt Eunice told me her horseman story. Her father, Edward, after he had moved to Laurel, he still wanted to make a little extra money, and he went out to the farm a lot to check on the renter, to see if he was doing right. So he took his large horses. He had a Percheron or Clydesdale stud horses, and he hired a man and put him on a pony, and he went all over to farms all over the area and used his horse as a stud. And if the farmers had a foal that year, then they had to pay him $15, and that's how he got a little extra income. Sometimes the man and the pony and the horse were gone and didn't even make it back for weekend. And she said after her father died, they still had the horses, and then her mother went ahead and sold those horses. I'll be reading from the First 100 Years Ferguson, Iowa History and Memory Book, 1882 to 1982. There's a write-up about Henry and Minerva Lukart. They were Eunice's grandparents. Henry Lukart and Minerva Jane Boyle, B-O-Y-L, both of Puckashick County, were married January 28, 1855, in the bride's home.
The couple built a home 9 miles south of Marshalltown on 120 acres of land which they had purchased. The Milwaukee Railroad ran lengthwise through the farm. Some of the land is still prairie grassland. The following children were born to this couple. Jonathan, who married Eliza Meech, Elizameech. They had one boy and 2 girls. Mary was married to Mr. Kendall and later to Sweeney. 4 children. They had 4 boys and 2 girls. William Westland married Augusta Schultz. They had 4 boys and 1 girl. Charlotte J., Eunice's mother, she was married to Edward Blackburn. They had 3 girls. Emma married George Putman. They had 2 boys and 2 girls. Margaret married Will Meech, Meech. Later in life married Will Brown, and in her retiring years, Lee Park became her husband. She had no children. Laura Amanda was married to Perry Wyatt. They had 1 boy and 1 girl. Christopher married Luella Webster. They had 4 girls and 5 boys. Charles united in marriage with Minnie Caper. They had no children. Frank was the youngest of the family, married to Luella Wilkinson, Wilkinson, of Beresford, South Dakota, on October 31st, 1906. They had 2 children, Rose and Violet. Henry Lukart passed away on June 30th, 1901. He was 68 years of age, having been born August 19th, 1833. Minerva Jane Lukart made her home with Frank and Luella until her death. She was born January 19th, 1841, and passed away at the Lukart home on October 28th, 1928. The couple lived their entire lives on the farm. Members of the Lukart family are buried in the Timber Creek Cemetery. After the death of his father, Frank stayed on the farm caring for his mother and farming the land. In 1906, Frank and Luella married and lived on the Lukart farm. Grandma Minerva remained with her son and daughter-in-law until her death in 1928. Rosa and Violet, daughters of Frank and Luella, attended a country school 2 miles south of their home on Center Street Road, which is now Highway 14. After completing grade school, the children entered the Laurel High School. Violet graduated in 1926 and Rosa in 1929. Both girls entered college and received teaching certificates. Cleon M. Pinto, son of Ralph and Bessie White Pinto of Marshalltown, and Rosa F. Lukart were married September 20th, 1941 in Trenton, Missouri. Cleon was employed by Fisher Governor, now called Fisher Control Company. They lived their entire lives in Marshalltown. However, Cleon served the U.S. Army Corps for 3.5 years. He spent 3 years of his time in England. Of this time, he returned to the States December 3rd, 1945. In 1950, they purchased an acreage at 702 Westward Drive, where Rosa presently resides. A section of the acreage was sold and is now known as the Pinto Addition. Cleo passed away October 22nd, 1980. He's buried at Rose Hill Memorial Gardens. Frank and Luella Lukart, Rosa's parents, eventually retired and moved to Marshalltown. They made their home with Rosa and Cleon in their late years. Frank died at the Pinto home February 17th, 1968. Luella passed away July 10th, 1968 at the Mary Greeley Hospital in Ames. Both are interned at the Timber Creek Cemetery in the family plot. Violet was married to Charles M. Vandekamp on December 22nd, 1928, spelled V-A-N-D-E, capital K-A-M-P. His parents were Wyatt Vandekamps of near Laurel. Charles rented a farm near St. Anthony, Iowa in the spring of 1929. Before marrying, Violet taught in the Waltz School near Marshalltown. The couple lived 6 years on the rented farms near St. Anthony. On March 18, 1930, a son, Philip Jean, was born. In 1935, Charles moved the family to a rented farm near Gierman. Philip started school in Gilman and graduated in 1952. During this time, Charles and Violet had purchased the Ramsey farm, to which the family moved in January of 1946. You said you were about 14 when your mom moved here to Marshalltown, and that the garage and everything was on the house already, and that you went to school at Marshalltown High School over on 2nd Street, and then you had a graduation with cap and gown.
2nd Avenue.
2nd Avenue, okay. And then you said you started teaching before you got your college finished, or did you go through the 4 years of college?
No, I started to teach before, and I had 2 years of college.
Uh-huh.
And as soon as I could get a job, I got a job because I had to have the money.
Was that here, around here?
Well, that's where I taught. No, it wasn't here. It was
Uh-huh.
in southern Missouri, or
Oh.
southern Iowa.
Uh-huh.
And I would teach a year, go to school, teach a year, and go to school, you see.
Uh-huh.
To the other.
And I didn't get it on the tape before, but you said you went to the University of Iowa?
No, not first.
Oh.
Lift this and see if I can find my check. Oh, there. Nothing is where it should be.
Well, we have a lot of papers.
No. I wanted to list schools.
Oh.
Now I've got the schools list.
Oh, okay. Now, is that where you taught, or where you
No,
went to school?
is where I taught.
Okay, so you were down in 7
No,
Iowa first.
Not first. I taught 1 year in a town by the name of Lorenz, which is in northern Iowa. And then I went to school more, and I got a chance to teach at Grundy Center half a year. A teacher was leaving.
Uh-huh.
And then I went to Moulton, which is in southern Iowa. Taught 2 years in Moulton. Then I went to Newton, and I taught 13 years in Newton. Then I went to Clinton, taught 9 years. And then I was in Marshalltown 1 year. That didn't work out at all. And I went to Keokuk in a year, and wound up in Fort Dodge with 16 years. So that's my teaching. That's
Uh-huh.
my teaching experience. And now what did we?
I just wanted to go over again about your college, because I don't think I got it on the first side. Where did you go to college first?
Right out of high school, I graduated, and I went to summer school right away.
Uh-huh.
And then, you see, as I could teach, I taught, and went back to school, but
Uh-huh.
I had no class in college because I didn't go regularly. I
Uh-huh.
would teach until I had money and then go again.
Uh-huh.
But I finished 4 years at UNI, Teachers College.
Okay.
And then I went 1 year to the University of Iowa. And that again was mostly in summers.
Uh-huh.
And then after that, I did 1 or 2 summer sessions. I told you about trying to go to Minneapolis and see the wonderful English teacher, and she did a show.
Right.
And I went to Boulder in Colorado, which is a beautiful town. And those were just short courses, like 4 weeks or 6 weeks, you know,
Uh-huh.
like people do now to catch. You have to go and make up some time now and again, don't you?
Right.
Well,
Keep up my points.
that's keep up your points. That's
Uh-huh.
what I was doing.
Uh-huh.
And so, of course, altogether, I taught 43 and a half years.
Oh, that's just wonderful. Oh, I wanted to ask you about your mother. I asked you some about your father, and you said
you were like 13 when he passed away, and most of the people in our family tend to have a regular funeral. Is that what they did in your family, or did they have any special funeral
Well,
ceremony?
My father had been ailing for several months before, and the local doctor couldn't do anything more for him. He said, "I'm sure it's cancer." So he said, "I want to send you to our city." So my father was operated on in the University Hospital and died there. And my mother bought in those days they had a container, a metal. Well, we had a casket and a metal container. It was the first time that anybody in Laurel had seen a metal container. And he was buried then in the little Graceland Cemetery right west of Laurel. And there was a big funeral, and all the town people, of course, knew him and turned out in the church. And since that time, my mother had passed away, and Lelia is buried there. And I also have a headstone for myself there. So that's the only one in the family who isn't there will be Mabel, who's buried with her husband's people.
Right. Now, I had down that your mother was Lukehart, and I don't have down when she was born. Do you know your mother's birthday, or?
Well, I have to look it up, of course.
Well, we could do that.
Yeah.
And
I want to show you the picture of it was a large family. I want to show you the picture of the 5 sisters. I think it is a beautiful picture. With all the sisters. And they were varied age. Her older sister was really away and married when my mother was just a girl. So they had lots of ages in their family too.
Right. Do you know her sisters' names?
Oh yes. We'll look at I'll have to go dig that up in the little room.
Okay. And let's see. Were your parents married, like in Laurel, or do you know where they were married at?
Well, it was just a very ordinary marriage, like a justice of the peace. And they were only 19 and 20 years old. You see. They were married very young.
Let's see.
And went out to farm right away. Went out on the farm right away.
Okay. Now you said, let's see, I'll ask you about Mabel and Harlan. And did they have a special wedding?
Yes, I think they did. I think in a little church up there.
Yeah. Did they have wedding gowns then, or a certain dress?
Well,
or?
She had a certain dress. Mabel was quite fussy. She liked fancy clothes, you know. And it seems to me I had a picture which I sent to Alan of her with the wedding dress and a big fancy hat. She liked big fancy hats.
Oh. Well, I saw you had a couple hat boxes up there. Was it quite the custom to wear hats?
Well, yes, for years it was. My mother and Lelia wore hats more than I did. By the time I was coming along, you could wear a scarf. Get by with it.
And we said, I hope I got it on the other side, that you never wore slacks, really, that you had a pair of knickers for college field trips, but that was about it. And so Grandma Mabel liked to dress fancy, huh?
Yeah.
Oh. Okay.
Oh yeah, she was the foxy one.
Oh. Well, Leonard said that she had 4 boys that died as babies, and she thought one might have lived to be about 6 months. Did you ever hear that one, or were they all?
I don't really. They all died very young. Some of them were just a few days old.
Do you know if any of them had names?
I don't know.
He-
They're all buried in that little cemetery.
Yeah, I know, it just says babies, it doesn't have any names,
I
so.
don't think they were even old enough.
Old enough to
have
name.
names.
Uh-huh,
And, yeah, of course, the doctor didn't think that she would ever carry a live child. He
oh,
thought that, yeah,
something was wrong there
yeah,
at first.
something was wrong, that she'll have to quit trying,
Uh-huh,
so.
they must have really wanted children to
Yeah,
try so
well,
hard.
Of course, Wardens had quite a tradition in their family.
Uh-huh,
The people from back east,
uh-huh,
so I'm sure that Harlan wanted a boy.
yeah. Well, just to backtrack a minute, we said that your father had cancer. Do you know what kind it was?
Well, it was in his chest.
Oh,
The doctor thought that perhaps it had been caused by an accident.
oh,
In those days, they thought cancers were caused, if you had a bruise.
by injury.
Yeah, by injury, yeah.
I have one friend that still believes that. She thinks
Uh-huh.
if injury can cause that.
Mhm.
I don't know if they proved it yet or not, but she thinks that it is. How about other illnesses? Were you and your sisters pretty healthy ladies?
Well, my mother had ulcers.
Uh-huh,
My sister Lelia died with cancer.
uh-huh,
And of course, Mabel was diabetic.
right.
And as far as I know, I guess I'm the one that has come through without any ailment.
How old was Aunt Leila when she passed away? Was it just before?
She would have been 95 in 2 weeks.
Oh, I knew it was something like that.
Yeah.
I was going to put down the date she died, and I couldn't think what it was.
Well, we'll look that up when I go in the other room. I think.
Uh-huh.
Better look.
And you said when my father Leonard was little, he had a lot of ear trouble. He thought maybe he might have been about, I don't know, 4 or 5 or
Well, he was
maybe
in
younger.
The winter he was here, the roads were so bad, and it was hard to travel from the farm here, and he had to be doctored. So they brought him and left him here. Now, I was away, but I was home at Christmas time. And of course, when I was home at Christmas time, I was the little one, and he wanted me to hold him all the time. Well, he wore me out. And also, I think I got a little infection from the mastoid behind his ear.
Oh,
Because afterward, I had trouble with my eyes for a while. And he was such a little fellow, but when he'd see the doctor come in the door, he'd put his hands over his ears and cry.
uh-huh.
He knew that the doctor hurt.
Right,
the hurt
it was going to hurt.
Yeah, and so we had him until the roads got better so they could take him home.
Uh-huh.
And of course his mother and father would come in and stay part of the time, but not all the time. His mother didn't come and stay with him. We had him,
Uh-huh.
just as
Well,
and he was willing to take up with us. That is, he would play and we would, when he felt good enough.
Uh-huh.
So that was pretty bad, that
Well,
mastoid
right.
thing.
Well, you told me you used to rock him on the old man chair. Yeah.
That old man chair.
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh. And say, look at the old man.
Uh-huh.
See the old man.
Uh-huh.
And he could, and he could see the old man. But he wasn't, I wouldn't say he was, well, he wasn't 3. I think he was less than 3.
Uh-huh.
About 2.5. He could talk all right, or he could jabber.
Uh-huh.
We could understand what he wanted and what he didn't want. And so that was kind of a bad deal for Lila was teaching, and she had to go to school and leave the boy with mother.
Oh, I
during the
see.
day. But that was something.
I imagine he probably was quite a handful if he didn't feel good.
Yeah.
He can be quite ornery at that age.
Yeah.
A
Yeah,
handful.
Bless his heart, I should say so.
We just said in the kitchen your favorite recipe was raisin pie that your mother made you.
Yeah. That was my, if I wanted something special, it was a raisin pie.
Uh-huh. And we were talking about cars just before I turned the tape, so I want to put down, you said Aunt Leila's gray car was probably a Nash, that you had a lot of Buicks through the years, and
I think the gray car was a Buick.
was a Buick. Uh-huh.
'Cause we had
Oh,
more
your father's first.
I think my father's first car was a Nash.
Uh-huh.
And after that, then he had old Buicks.
Uh-huh. Okay. And
In heavens, I didn't have a car until I was like teaching. I was teaching. Oh yeah, that was, gosh, yes. That must have been about in 1940, before I had a car.
uh-huh. Well, you said Mabel probably had the first camera. When did they have the first radio? Do you remember that?
I don't remember.
Uh-huh.
We had a little radio like the one on the top.
Uh-huh.
And the first television we had was one that Mabel and Harlan had, and she said, I'm going to give that to Mother and buy a new one. So then we had one, and it whirled. It was on a axis,
Uh-huh.
and we had it there in the front room. It was so that was one that Mabel gave Mother.
Uh-huh.
Of course, Mother liked the radio. She listened to a lot of stories on the radio.
Uh-huh.
They used to have whole stories. Sometimes people would read the stories, you know.
Uh-huh.
Ames College did a lot of that.
I see. When you moved to this house and you were about 14, did they have indoor plumbing then?
Oh yes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, sure.
Or electricity?
Oh yes.
Uh-huh.
The house is pretty much now as it was then. That's so hasn't changed too much.
Well, my dad Leonard said that his parents were one of the first to get electricity and indoor plumbing out there at the farmhouse.
They probably were.
The neighbors thought they were quite well-to-do because they had some kind of generator in the basement or something.
Yeah, they did.
Uh-huh.
And I'm sure my people down on their farm, on the Blackburn farm, didn't have electricity for a long time.
Uh-huh.
They didn't have it.
Okay, and the house there was taken down and a new one was built, right? Or
Yeah.
uh-huh.
But Lelia and I built the new one, you know.
Uh-huh.
That was in our day because the house was so old.
Uh-huh.
We just had to do something with it. It was getting so old.
I wanted to just ask you, well, you said you were just a little tyke there, but the farmhouse there, was it like a two-story older type farmhouse,
Yeah,
like
it
you
was
kind of think of?
Older two-type,
Uh-huh.
but parts of it had upstairs.
Uh-huh.
I told you about going behind the kitchen. Up over the kitchen was where the hard men slept.
Oh, they slept there and everything.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Well, of course, and the family lived in the rest of the house
Uh-huh.
downstairs,
I see.
and we could see that. Well,
Did they have quite a big thrashing crew, or when the hired men came, or were they there all the?
You see, the two boys, Ed and
William.
Bill,
Uh-huh.
ran the main thing. They had to furnish the horses. But then when they'd go to a farmhouse, the farmer there had to furnish stuff. He
I
had to
see.
furnish horses and,
Uh-huh.
that too. Then
Well-
they'd move on to another place. And sometimes they'd haul stuff too. They'd come with racks of loads of oats,
Mm-hmm.
from another farm. For instance, if your farm were just down the road, you might bring on racks, you'd bring your oats and pitch it in.
Uh-huh.
It seemed like they all worked together better.
Oh, skip back just one time. I forgot to ask you about Frances Blackburn, George's wife. You know, when she married her second husband, and her name was Roach, R-O-A-C-H.
Well, Roach was the railroad man.
Is that when
They
they?
married her under false pretenses. Yes.
But did she cook for the railroad then?
Yeah.
That's what
She
Leonard
furnished
said.
meals
Uh-huh.
in State Center.
Oh,
The
State
railroad
Center.
was going through State Center.
Uh-huh. Were they married very long before they caught up with his
No,
ill-doing, or?
Well,
Because it,
they must have been married long enough to have Francis.
uh-huh,
So I don't know, but he got his walking papers right then.
uh-huh.
The railroad boss fired him.
Because in one of the papers it said she had a third husband named Brown,
Yeah.
and Leonard said that she's buried in the Haverhill Cemetery.
No, so is he.
Oh, okay.
They're both buried there.
Uh-huh.
And old Brown was a moocher. He wanted my father to pay for the stone, and my father said, "We're not going to pay for the stone." He said, "She was your wife." He said, "You're to pay for it." So they got in a quarrel. Of course, my father didn't care for Brown.
Uh-huh.
And I had seen, when I was a little girl, I had seen Brown. Brown used to come to Laurel.
Uh-huh.
He used to drive in and, want to stay for a meal or stay overnight or something.
Uh-huh.
My mother would put up with him all right. She tolerated him. But my dad never did forgive him.
Uh-huh.
He didn't think he was much of a...
What did he do for a job? Anything?
Well, he was retired by that time.
Uh-huh.
He had a son. They were from Chicago. He had a son who came out from Chicago who was a policeman.
Oh.
That I know.
Uh-huh.
Old Brown's son was a policeman.
Okay.
And
And then I was thinking I should ask you some other questions here. Of course, I know you and Lelia always kept track of all the family members all through the years, and
yeah.
was Aunt Wilma, was she a nurse when she met Harry, or was she here
Yes.
when she got married, or
Yes.
before and they went to California together, or?
Yes. You see, she was in Chicago, nursing in Chicago, but she was working in a hospital where there were lots of consumptive people, and that's where she picked up the bug.
Yeah, the TB.
Yeah, the TB.
And then was she in a certain place till she got over that?
Well, California, they decided California was better weather, better place. She would do better out there.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And then, let's see. Laura June, did she meet Claude here? I know he's from Missouri.
Yeah. Well, Claude and his brother came up to work at farms here.
Oh.
And that's how they were
Met.
working here. That's how they met.
Uh-huh.
And at first, Claude, I guess Claude squired Wilma for a while, went with Wilma for a while before he picked out Laura June.
Oh, I've heard that happening before.
Yeah. And of course, his brother, they were two bachelors looking for girls to go to parties and dances and so on.
Uh-huh.
And so that's how they got started.
Okay. I'm going to turn this off while I think of another question for you.
I didn't want to share that
Didn't want-
with anybody.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know. Libby Mike's wife asked me one time why I didn't get married, and she said, "You're such a nice person, I don't know why you didn't get married." Well, I said, I guess it was my fault. I had a couple of chances, but I said I wasn't particular about those particular men, so I said I never got really interested in them.
Sometimes the right one doesn't come along. Harlan was telling me last night that Alex has about 5 friends that they all go around as a group, and there's I don't know if it's 2 girls or 3, and then 2 or 3 boys, and they all went to the prom together, 3 boys and 2 girls, and then instead of getting a prom picture, they got all 5 of them together and had the picture. But he said that was a little better than just dating one when they're kind of young in high school like that. Well, they having a group time then. And did you have any thing like skating or sports that you like to do, or?
I was never around water, so I couldn't swim and I couldn't skate. And I didn't even have roller skates, and I never even had a bicycle. Because in Laurel, you say, we didn't have the use for them. So no, I didn't. I liked to play on the playground. We played games that we ran. We had lots of games that we played that were running games out in the schoolyard. And then when I don't know, I always liked to, when I was in college, I never did learn to swim, which I should have done, but I liked games that I played. You know, to play soccer or some of that.
Did they play softball back then, or?
I never did. I'm sure we did. I'm sure we had ball. But, and of course, in grade school we played ball. Lelia used to come out and play with us when she was teaching. She would play with the kids. You know, that was a good way of keeping the game going and keeping fights down and so on. And she was good at ball, baseball. Of course, when my father was a young man, he played baseball with the country team for a while, so he liked that.
Do you recall what age you were when your mother passed on?
Oh yes. Goodness, we're in the 9s. I better look it up so that I'm sure, so that I have it right.
Yeah. Well, that's okay. We'll take a break and I'll fix some lunch. Well, I'm going to have to ask you on the tape about the piano, since I have the piano, Aunt Eunice.
The what?
The piano.
Oh.
Elizabeth just played in a little piano recital this month, and they have different ratings, and she got an excellent rating. There's just one higher, superior, so she's coming along pretty good.
Good.
You said you got it in 1915, Aunt Lelia got it. Would that have been over in Laurel, or were you already?
Yes, at Laurel. We owned it at Laurel. She owned it at Laurel. I don't know why well, that was just something that she had wanted. And she didn't play, you know.
Well, she probably liked to pump it.
Well, that's not the pump one. The pump one is the little organ. The little organ. You never saw that. Now, come here.
All right. 3 for Francis. Mom was telling me you had some relative in Canada. Who's up there?
Well,
Cousin, or?
yeah. There were, when my people lived on the farm, just a mile east of where they lived, were their relatives, and they were Putnams, P-U-T-N-A-M, Putnam. And Putnam still lived there. The son still lives there now. And of course the kids went back and forth. They just went across the field, you know, to play with each other. And when Leela was growing up, a good-sized girl. One time, Aunt Em was having a baby, and so she wanted to know if she thought Lelia could come and stay with her while she had the baby. Well, Mother didn't know. She didn't think Lelia was quite up to that, but she couldn't go herself, so she said yes, she should try it. So Lelia went over there and stayed for a week or two while they had the baby. So that was and then those Putnams, the sons went to Canada. They lived in Canada. They became citizens of Canada. The man who was about the same age as Lelia was in the legislature. He ran for the legislature.
Oh.
And was even in the Canadian legislature.
What part of Canada?
Oh, the southern part.
Uh-huh.
And then when Laura June and Mrs. Goodwin and Claude and I went to Canada, we visited in Regina,
Oh.
the town of Regina, and we met one of those cousins.
Oh. Well, that was great.
Yeah, met a cousin
Uh-huh.
there. And we were out to the farm, where their farm was, and they were having some kind of a show in town, and we went to that. And at that time, the man's mother was living, but of course she passed away afterward, and we met her, Grace, Aunt Grace we called her.
Uh-huh.
And she remembered me as a little girl.
We were gonna see if we had the names of the 5 sisters. Can you think of them, or do I need to grab the picture? Or one was Aunt Em.
Yeah, Emma was the one that married Putnam,
Okay.
but I don't know that I can find them.
Well, we don't have to look her. Maybe we could leave that one for next time.
Yeah.
See if we can find out. Did they all marry?
No, the oldest one she married a Sweeney,
Uh-huh.
and for a long time Lelia wrote to them and had their names. She's got a whole card full of Sweeneys